Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast where I give you my unfiltered take straight off the cuff. And today, that intro is a bit of a lie actually. I'm gonna just take a moment to talk about a classic record that I've actually been pretty obsessed with lately. I am still new to it. I mean, this record is pretty old. It's from 2005, so it is definitely a first impression of sorts, but I have listened to this thing pretty obsessively for the last month or so. I guess just every now and again, and I'm sure other people have this, every now and again, maybe every couple of years, I'll find a classic record that I've been aware of for ages, maybe even have listened to before, but it didn't quite connect with me. And then I'll just listen to it, and suddenly it's, amongst my favourite albums of all time. The previous two this happened with, at least the biggest examples I can think of, is Interpol's debut Turn on the Bright Lights and Burial's Untrue, both of which are fucking excellent records, and I'd recommend anyone go check them out. But the one I'm going to be talking about today is actually the Mars Volta Francis the Mute. So, as someone who's been into heavy music or rock music for pretty much as long as I've been listening to music, period, the Mars Volta is obviously a name I've been very familiar with for a long time. A pretty legendary band within the realm of prog rock, obviously being birthed largely from the death of At the Drive-In, who are an equally legendary post-hardcore band. But to be honest, I was never massively into At the Drive-In. I understand why people really like that band, and I certainly understand what their influence is on the heavy music landscape in general, and I can really appreciate that, but they've just never been a band that have, I don't know, really jumped out to me. Every now and again, I really respect the performances they put on, so their early live shows look incredible. And they've got a couple songs that I really do enjoy, but overall the record just I don't enjoy the way they write hooks. The way that a lot of the production is done is it's got a lot of that very bursting at the seams punk energy, but the way they approach songwriting just doesn't mesh with that particularly well, at least for me. But I understand a lot of people like it, so that's the end of that really. But I always assumed that the Mars Volta were a way more proggy band because I didn't know they had this connection to At the Drive-In. So after finding that out, I was kind of more interested in checking them out. After realizing it wouldn't essentially just be listening to Dream Theater or whatever. Because I never really enjoyed prog when I was younger, especially. And I listened to D Last in the Conatorium, and I really did enjoy that record for a long time. That record I've been on for quite a while now. It's a pretty fantastic debut record, incredibly well formed for just a new band, essentially. All that makes sense considering all these guys are pretty incredible musicians. So yeah, really solid album. Really I'd recommend it to anyone who isn't super into prog necessarily, but likes the idea of the expansive songs and the huge hooks and the kind of more jammy elements of prog. All that's still there, but it's just got this ferocity that comes more from the post-hardcore side of the sound. So it's still a very good record. I would go as far as to say I love it, and I remember at the time I was like, this is a really fucking solid album, so I should probably check out the later stuff. And I remember listening to Francis the Mute and just being whatever, and kind of went back to Deloused. But for whatever reason, I listened to Francis the Mute again, maybe I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, and just front to back, it 100% clicked. I completely understood the appeal of this record. Basically, what you get here is an even more matured and developed version of the sound they were producing on Deloused, but with a couple notable improvements. The jammed out sections are just so wild on this record. I don't know how else to describe it. Everything on this record is so tight and so perfectly orchestrated, but at the same time feels so freeform and jammed out, and that's a quality that D-Louse definitely had, but it just feels so much more impactful here because all of the songwriting feels a lot stronger. The actual structure of the record itself also feels more each thing reinforces each other more on this record. It has more of an ebb and flow, whereas I feel like D-Louse sometimes the ambient sections on D-Louse sometimes drag a little bit, and the more jammed out sections can do it sometimes as well. This record strikes a perfect balance between the ambient breakup sections and the really intense proggy sections. The other thing as well is I think there's more of a dynamicism between the two. The ambient sections often are a fair bit more sparse on this record, and I actually think that's a huge benefit. But essentially, the main improvements you're getting is in songwriting. I think the hooks are improved. The playing is just, this is some of the best playing I think I've ever heard on a record, to be honest. It's fucking wild. Like, there's so many incredible performances from basically everyone who shows up on this record. But again, it never feels like it's like going up its own arse or something. It always has that like viscera and that ferocity that you really want from like a rock band or a hardcore band or whatever. And the other big influence that just isn't on Deloused at all is the Latin music influence, and that adds a ton of flavour to so many of these songs. So yeah, with those improvements, it's just, this thing is a ride from front to back. Interestingly, actually, on this record, if you've never listened to it, there's a song, the title track, Francis the Mute, is supposed to be the first track on the album, but it got cut because of, from what I understand, it couldn't fit onto like the vinyl pressing at the time or something like that, or maybe like it required... well, it probably wouldn't be a CD issue, actually. I can't imagine that would be the case. It was probably something to do with vinyl, if I had to guess. But basically, they couldn't fit it on the record because it made the record too long, and there was concerns over that, whether it was label concerns or whatever, I'm not sure. But that's the broad picture, basically. But I would definitely recommend listening to this record with the Francis the Mute opening track. You can find it because it was on... I think it was released as an extra track on the Japanese edition. But this thing is just a great way to kick the record off because it sets a very strange tone in a lot of ways, but it also brings in those just incredible hooks. Like, the melody, this band's ability to, like, write melodies that really stick in your head is almost, like, in its own league, to be honest. There are so many melodies and grooves across this record that will stick out in your head vividly, and they hang on to these just long enough for it to be incredibly impactful and have extra instrumentation over the top to feel incredibly expansive as well. I think that's what this band does best, honestly. It's like the ability to lock into a fucking awesome core groove and then expand it with just jams and solos and extra vocal melodies and that kind of stuff, effects and all that crazy shit. Yeah, it's just... That's definitely their biggest strength. And Francis the Mute, like I said, is a great introduction because it has kind of some weird experimentation at the start. It's got incredible vocal melodies, kind of shows off some of the more ambient, more weird textured stuff towards the end, and then it also ends on the acoustic guitar that leads straight into the next song, which is the opening track of the regular record. And when I first started listening to this record and when it clicked for me, I didn't listen to it with the Francis the Mute opening track, so even if you just listen to the regular record with the regular opening track, I think there's still a lot to really enjoy. And I actually think it serves as a really good track one, to be honest, anyway, because the acoustic guitar that opens it serves as a solid intro, and then the juxtaposition between that kind of calming, very melodic, almost like slightly bittersweet melody on the guitar with the vocals over it, that going straight into just this absolutely insane, winding, really kind of like skitty, like, I don't even know what you'd call it exactly. It's just a really like almost aggressive, slightly post-hardcore tinged prog passage that's just, like I said, it's very fast, very kind of like lots of ghost notes on the snare and that kind of thing. Like, the grooves are insane. There's bass grooves that like will pop out the mix and like lock straight in with the drums, and it just sounds incredible. Like, it comes in with so much viscera and energy. And that it's just a great mission statement, really. This song is incredibly long. Well, not incredibly long. It's like 13 minutes. But for how much happens in it, it feels longer than it is to some extent. And I know normally that would almost be like a criticism. But here I think it's actually... it's a huge benefit because it feels like the song is so well thought out, so well orchestrated, with so many like twists and turns. It's difficult to get your head around initially. And considering Francis the Mute isn't a million miles off that either, although the second track, Cygnus, is definitely it's definitely got more sections to it, and it's very full on the entire way through. There aren't really any or as many ambient sections as there are on Francis the Mute. So it's just one hell of a second or opening track, depending on which way you look at it. Needless to say, the next track, being a 5-minute barn burner of a single, is the perfect choice for the next thing. Again, this is another place where they just illustrate how good they are at writing melodies. The vocal melody and the hook on the chorus is absolutely unforgettable, I think, once you hear it, and the way that this guitar solo comes in on the second verse just sounds absolutely incredible once you really sink your teeth into it. In reality, the song's 5 minutes 50, but like 2 minutes ish of it are kind of like these repeating, slightly glitchy electronic cycles, I guess you could say, towards the end that lead into the next track, which is probably the most Latin influenced track on the entire record. It's another long track, 12 minutes long, with a bit more energy. It's not quite as like frantic as Cygnus was. It's a bit more mid-paced, a bit more focused on like showing off some interesting like keyboard textures essentially. I'm pretty sure the lyrics themselves are in they're in another language. I'm not sure why. I guess maybe like Spanish, something like that. Honestly, I don't know enough about Latin music to be coming honest, but it's got a lot of Latin music influence with, different instrumentation, like bongos coming into the mix. There's actually a bongo solo on this track, which is just fucking awesome in every way. So that's another like huge track that just kind of, that I think is, like I said, it's less frantic and there are less insane sections to it as something like Cygnus, but it's another really good, very well written, expansive track, and I think that's the core of it. I have a friend who fucking adores this record. It's like one of his favorites, and this is his favorite track on the record because it just has so much flavor. Like the Latin music influences do show up elsewhere in some of the melodies and instrumentation, but this is where they go as far down that route as they're going to. Then after that, you get the track Miranda, That Ghost Just Isn't Holy Anymore. And this is another very long track, but this is kind of a huge change of pace. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of a Swans song off of The Seer. So there's a song on The Seer with it's essentially like a 15-minute build-up to a 5-minute acoustic song. And this is kind of the same to some extent. It's like most of this track is just an ambient build. It's very textured, very kind of detailed. It's not just a bland, nothing. But it's essentially like a long ambient build-up into a trumpet-led ballad is the best way I could put it. And it's another just fucking awesome moment in the track listing. It's another really nice kind of more mellow track that I think splits up the pretty full-on like Latin track before it, and also it leads into the just insanity that is Cassandra Gemini and the final track on this album. So calling this one track is, I don't want to say deceptive, because it is one entire piece, but it's split into like 10 movements or something like that. Each track is listed out in the track listing, but the whole thing is supposed to be listened to front to back. Everything leads into each other, and it's this 30-minute journey that is almost like an even more insane and even more overblown version of Cygnus. It's just constant with the just wild playing from everyone. They're all firing on all cylinders. There's millions of intricate little grooves, really, really catchy melodies that have tons of instrumentation, like backing them up and reinforcing it. There's just a ton to dive into with this track. It's honestly almost too much to describe. There's moments that delve more into that ambient stuff, but a lot of the time when it does that, there's still kind of more freeform, almost like soloing over the top of it. So it's not quiet as just like I don't want to say bland, because like I said, the ambient sections on this record aren't really bland. They're just low key, I suppose. But they're a bit more intense, I suppose. They don't let the momentum of the track totally die off at any point, which I guess is the important part, really. But yeah, that's honestly the entire record. It's absolutely fucking stunning, in my opinion. I almost can't believe that I listened to this and it didn't really like do anything for me a while back. And I know there's still one of the opinions I find very surprising is there's still a decent number of people that much prefer, or maybe not much prefer, but definitely prefer Deloused. I think that's their best record. I, for the life of me, cannot understand why, honestly. Like, each to their own and all that. If you prefer Deloused, like, have your fun, go for it, whatever. But for me, Deloused is like an 8 out of 10 record that I think is, I love it. I think it's a fantastic debut. But in every conceivable way, every benefit or every strength they had on Deloused is just improved on Francis the Mute, with more influences, tighter writing, a better structure. So like, how I was saying there's lots of ambient sections on this record that really serves to benefit it. I feel like all of the prog intenseness wouldn't hit as hard if there weren't so many breathers in between those sections, because I think if you removed all the ambient sections on this record, I still think it would be a very good record, but it definitely would be a little bit much, I think, and you would end up kind of... There'd be a lot of spots that would get overshadowed by other spots because they're close together and have a similar enough like level of intensity that they wouldn't differentiate themselves as well as they could, I suppose. And the ambient sections really, really help to differentiate each of the more intense sections, I guess. I think that's the biggest benefit of having them in the track listing. It is a long record though. This is a 90-minute record, so I could definitely understand if you're not into prog in general. That might be a bit of a big ask. Like I said, I'm not especially myself, but I don't mind longer kind of experimental records. And when the playing and the viscera is so strong on this record, it's kind of hard to not enjoy it front to back. But yeah, I think that's basically everything I want to say about Francis Mute. 100% certified classic fucking record. Yeah, I can't believe it took me this long to get into it. I highly recommend it to anyone who's into guitar-driven music. There's nothing on here that should turn a ton of people off. Like, it's not so heavy that it's gonna turn people... Well, it's not really that heavy at all, honestly. In a lot of ways, it's more just kind of I guess you could say it's just more intense than anything else, but even that's a little bit misleading. It's just very, I don't know, very visceral and very full on, I suppose, is the best way to put it. But yeah, if you're into rock music, this is like amongst the best. I would highly, highly recommend this record. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I want to say about this. Cheers for listening. If you've enjoyed this so far, do consider subscribing or liking. I definitely appreciate it. Also, let me know what you think of it. I haven't really heard that much from the people that listen to these podcasts, so I'd be really curious to see what other people are feeling on this record, essentially. I imagine, honestly, anyone that gets it will mostly be already a fan of it, so I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, I guess, but hey, that's fine. Yeah, just listening. Have a nice day, and peace out. Hope to see you all around. Peace out.